It doesn't say so. Oh, yes, something is. No, it doesn't tell me that we're live. You're getting the.
Yep, I see us.
Okay.
And we're still, let's see. Okay, this window I'll have to close.
So, yes,
All right, now I'm going to share my screen and bring up the countdown clock timer. Okay, share. And then we will begin this in just a few seconds.
okay.
Here we go. We'll be officially live in 10 minutes. Hey, James, see you're back. We're going to be live officially in 10 minutes, but now everything we say is being piped over to
Yes.
YouTube and will be part of the archival video, and the public can hear us.
Yeah. Great.
We're already getting people saying hello from Sweden, Lancashire, UK, Portugal, Switzerland.
Well, that's nice. Hello to all them back. Yeah. So you've had nice weather, Emmy, over there.
We've had a beautiful spring.
Yeah.
We've had a few really hot days, but it's been warming up slowly. And the flowers are so pretty right now, all the colors.
Yeah.
So it's been really nice.
Great.
And like I said earlier, I've been planting my garden with my husband and my little
Yeah.
puppy dog. So that's been nice. And we, of course, well, I'm glad we had really cold temperatures here in Minnesota. So Mother Nature's still kicking it out. But of course, we had the other kind of ice here this winter, which was
Yeah.
also intense. So it's
Yeah.
very welcome to have some beautiful nature and the trees leafing out and seeing the greenery again.
Yeah. Yeah. Assisted by artificial intelligence, of course.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Emmy.
Hmm?
The fellow I interviewed yesterday, Stephen Kotler,
Hmm.
and his wife have a property they call Rancho Chihuahua, and they rescue dogs, in particular dogs and cats that are maimed or have been abused, and it's like a rehabilitation center for animals that have been harmed and neglected, and then they heal them and find homes for them.
Oh, it's a sanctuary. How beautiful. Where is that located?
Well, it was here in New Mexico, but they just moved it to Lake Tahoe in Nevada.
Oh, how wonderful. What a beautiful mission. Just
Yeah.
bringing that up also because I my dog is a happens to be a Chihuahua,
Okay.
little 6 pound
Yeah.
little girl. So, oh, I love hearing that to take care of the animals.
Yeah, it was a very interesting interview, and it's sort of relevant to our topic today. He's got a new book out called We Are as Gods, and he's arguing that the all of the technology that's coming online now is interacting with each other and creating enormous potential for human abundance. And but of course, as we will be talking about, there are many, many
Yeah.
hazards
Yeah.
potentially. But his attitude, he's also a specialist in Csikszentmihalyi's concept of flow, and he's arguing that in order to adapt to the changes that are going to inevitably occur and are happening at a very rapid pace, that we have to learn how to remain in the flow state more of the time. So that when we're in the flow state, we won't allow AI to subsume our lives.
which is connected to intuition, which is a big mission of ours on New Thinking Aloud to continue to talk about and fan the flames on.
Absolutely, that's a very relevant aspect, Emmy, in the construct or understanding what it is we're talking about. When we're talking about a human, which is very relevant, and that's one of the starting points in many senses.
Yeah. I'm curious about that conversation you've had that I think you said you just recorded yesterday, Jeff,
It's
because
already
it's
been uploaded,
oh,
as
it's
a matter.
uploaded. Okay, we are gods,
Yeah,
and then it folds in also technology.
yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
In fact, that's his whole argument is because of technology, we are as gods. And as the archetypal example he uses, technology now enables people who are blind because of macular degeneration to see,
Oh, yes, there's been
Yeah,
a lot of advancements with
which is,
technology.
you know, in the Bible, that would be considered a divine power to enable the blind to see.
yeah. Although the normal processes of operation of knowledge, which are seen to be inherent in humans, allow for the application of knowledge for those purposes and prevention as well. So I'm less inclined to solely attribute it towards technology in
Mm,
the yeah. So that's all the arguments. Musk used the same arguments as well, starting off, although it's not his starting point in reality. He's not out to help the blind as the primary, as his primary motivation. So we can get back to these are some of the issues I'm sure will come up in the
yeah.
context. Yeah.
One of the other examples he cited was a company called Colossal Biosciences, and they have only one mission, which is to take extinct species like the dodo bird and others and bring them back to life using genetic engineering.
Yes, I've criticized that in my book as well. Ireland, I don't recognize the
Yeah.
bringbacks, I call them, and
Mm.
how they will spread diseases that are defunct when they're brought back as well. Um,
Mm.
so, so I'm cautious about
Yeah.
a lot of these wonderful tests of Promethean power.
Mm. What did you say? Promethean power?
Promethean power, yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, the sense of Prometheus, and that's what some of the Islamic scholars as well use that to distinguish from pontifical man or the human in relation to the divine,
Hmm.
where the human becomes or seeks to become the divine, which is possibly implicit as well in the we are gods. So it's getting again, it's that's where the debate is about where the
Yeah.
exact construct of knowledge is and what the options are and what the considerations are. That's what I think is important.
Yeah. The phrase "we are as gods," according to these authors, came from Stuart Brand, the founder of the Whole Earth Catalog, who said it in 1968. He said, because of technology and we had just gone to the moon, he said, we are as gods, so we better get good at it.
Yeah. Well, there's similar things, yeah, H.G. Wells and whatever. There's variants of that
Hmm.
um, throughout his literature. So yeah, it's a well, it's an idea I'll address perhaps opening. Yeah.
In the
Yeah,
Bible, it also mentions ye are gods. I put that in our wedding ceremony with my husband, and that comes from Psalm 82:6 and is later quoted by Jesus in John 10:34. Not that I'm necessarily advocating for any particular religion or not, but that's actually in the Bible. Ye
And
are
it was
Yeah,
gods.
in,
but it's qualified as well afterwards, or it's contextualized. Another proposition that, that I'm not saying in relation to you, Emmy, but we know the devil can cite scripture for his purpose.
All
And I may
true,
be
all
myself.
true. I just wanted to
But,
mention that there was even an earlier representation of that phrase.
but
That's
that's
why.
right. You're correct, and that's what the references are to, and to try and understand what they are. So you're absolutely right. So that's the one of the main origins. So I agree with you, and I know that you wouldn't quote or misquote for bad reasons. Yeah.
and you used that phrase in your wedding ceremony.
I did.
Uh-huh.
We are all, in my opinion, godlike, or can be if we choose to be, perhaps.
Well, as a matter of fact, I also recently completed an interview with a new one with Vladimir Mishkovich, who was an Orthodox monk, Eastern Orthodox monk, talking about the same issue from his perspective.
Yes.
Well, welcome everybody. We are live. I'm Jeffrey Mishlove, host of New Thinking Aloud. I'm here with my co-host, Emmy Vadnais,
Hi, everybody. Welcome. So happy to have you all here and be
and
with
our
you,
special
Jeff and James.
guest for today, James Tunney. We'll
Yeah.
be talking about
Hello.
the AI crisis. So I'm going to turn the floor over to you, James, to make some introductory remarks to set the tone for our conversation, and then we will be taking questions from our viewers.
Okay, Jeff, and thanks for the introduction, and thanks, Emmy. So, as a starting point, I would try and crystallize perhaps my main objection, the context of my critique of artificial intelligence. That its primary problem for human is in relation to governance, in relation to its inevitable, pervasive spread in our lives as an agentic force through convergence of various applications, whereby our lives are will be increasingly controlled by AI. And this is coming about through an undemocratic process led by transnational corporations who are giant corporations who can capture governance and regulation. And even then, they can operate under the shadow of the security state to have exceptions from the normal rules that apply. There are rules increasingly that are emerging. For example, there's principles from the OECD in 2019, and there's a Rome statement associated with religious leaders in 2020. And the EU have an EU AI Act in 2024. It's a regulation which is binding on member states. So it has started to address some of the more extreme issues that we have. The United States, the federal approach hasn't been like the EU, but companies will be forced to abide by EU standards because there are fines up to 7% of the global annual turnover, for example. So these are serious in relation to certain areas, but they don't deal with the problem of national security exceptions and the growth of a global technocratic regime. And the technocratic paradigm that Pope Francis talked about is the fearful one. Now, within that context, there are a lot of people who are very optimistic, who are involved in the process, and who see this as a great opportunity. I'm very skeptical about that. I'm skeptical about the people who have told us it's a great opportunity without explaining about the environmental damage. There's thousands of data centers across the United States. They are using huge amounts of electricity and water, and per capita, it's not the biggest. I mean, Ireland is up in the top 5 of per capita usage of data centers. So these data centers now use more than the urban populations in electricity. And I've heard people in various interviews saying that AI doesn't pose a big threat in relation to resources. That's clearly wrong. AI involves a huge use of electricity and a huge use of water. And the use of water is particularly dangerous because it uses water in a way to evaporate heated systems in a way that doesn't come back into the hydrological cycle and distorts it. So we're facing a situation, when you look at the totality of these regimes, of something actually like what John Lilly talked about in the solid state entity. I never thought that of all the guests you had that I'd be thinking seriously about his vision of the future as reality opening before our eyes. For people that don't know, Jeffrey has been involved in this from the start. He's interviewed John McCarthy, Minsky, Dreyfus, Searle, a whole Goertzel, an artificial and general intelligence, or his work in that area, a whole range of people from the start, and has been addressing these issues. So the issues are not only about the issues of misalignment, of terrorism, but governance is the first thing. And that governance is associated with a view of the world, a view of knowledge, a view of the human being. So it behoves us to start off and explain what the human being is and who they are. So we've moved from if you like, the medieval scholasticism and the scholastic view of the individual towards a modern stochastic view, which is about probabilities, where the datum of the individual, that which is given, whether you think it comes from God or from evolution or somewhere else from aliens, there is a datum of us which is there, and that's contrasted with a view of the human as a construct, an atomist construct of data that can be manipulated and managed, and that's a view which comes from a certain philosophical position. So what I'm arguing is, and as I've talked to Jeff about theological anthropology, that it really comes down to the idea of who we are, and we're forced actually to have a view on who we are and to have a view about such issues, about whether God exists and are we created in the image of God. Now, I am committing myself to that scholastic philosophy, to the Catholic viewpoint. So I'm hands up, I'm doing that. Now, you can say, well, I'm not listening to you because that's a religious viewpoint. Okay, but then you have to excise the whole of basically Western philosophy for 1,500 years, which is informed by the Greco-Roman antecedents of that. What I am saying is that if we look at, for example, and it's not necessary to my view, my critiques of AI have not been based on a religious view, but we do have to come to an ontology of the person. And what I would say is that if we look back through the scholasticism, going back to the early scholastics from Ireland, like Eriugena, who's using the Neo-Platonist thought up through Thomas Aquinas, etc., reflected also in Islam, in the Islamic scholars, we see a view, well, from a Catholic perspective, of the individual having a soul, which includes the intellect, the intellectus, and the ratio that comes from there, which is incorporated in a mens or a mental state, which is embodied in a total which is spiritual. Now, the spiritual aspect in particular is orientated to God. So that's why I use the term, as Evelyn Underhill does, of spiritual consciousness. So I'm not prepared to cede what has happened in the last 100 years to describe everything in terms of what science has described consciousness as, to reduce that. It's a massive reduction, and a lot of this massive reduction is part of moving towards a post-humanist world. And the post-humanist world is indicated by the idea of the singularity, and the singularity in many senses is accumulation of a long rejection of anything above the human, of any idea that there is a spiritual world, a meaningful world, as Arthur Young used to talk about, up to and including God, whoever you can conceive or God to be. So I'm arguing that this is the contrast, and in the end, we have limited choices. The choice is: do we want to continue to be human, or do you become a cyborg, adapt, and become post-human? And most of the people that are driving the tech companies, they express a misanthropic view. They don't particularly like humans. Even people who are supposedly critics of AI, like Hinton, says humans are not special. There's no such thing as God. These views are views that they have put into the equation, which needs a response. And people like Ben Goertzel has said, we're making God. This is what I believe, not gods. We're making God. So I didn't put theology into the center space of this argument, but they did. And I'm not claiming to be a theologian. What I am saying is the human has to decide whether they want to be a human or whether they adapt and become a cyborg and then post-human, integrated into the network. And I believe that the whole thrust of all these systems, they're not separate. They're driven by this idea of combining humans into the network, where we're forced to do, including us. But I don't want to be included in that. I don't want to. I've avoided successfully up to now having a mobile phone. But now you're going to be getting AI agents, and they're going to include you. And as that happens, your ability to exert agency is being reduced. And the last point, you were very good, Jeff, in choosing the time of our Fatima talk, which coincided with the papal talk. But the Pope, I think, today announced an AI commission. I expected him to sign an encyclical on May the 15th, the anniversary of Rerum Novarum. He may have signed it. It's not clear whether he did or not. But I think this week we will hear, they usually go through a process of translation. We will hear about his encyclical, and I have great hope for that. I believe he's one of the major forces who has the intellectual capabilities with his studies in mathematics and canon law and theology to mount a successful defense, a foundation on which to, not just a Catholic thing, a philosophical foundation with which to oppose the serious threats that AI poses. So my approach is quite critical. I see the benefits, but I don't want it to be a situation like that people don't look at the huge costs involved in the choices they're making.
Mm. Jeff, you might want to unmute you had politely muted yourself when when James was speaking.
Thank you, Emmy.
Okay.
We have a question here from one of our volunteers, Elizabeth Lord, who's also been a guest on New Thinking Aloud and
Hey,
is an
Elizabeth.
author herself.
Mm-hmm.
She says, there has been a discussion about whether AI is sentient or conscious in a human sense. Firstly, please define what you think consciousness or sentience is, and then your opinion on whether it's true of the current AI. If not, do you think it's possible for it to develop sentience or consciousness, and what would it do with it?
No is the short answer. Again, if we look at it from the idea of what a human is in relation to its comparison, well, then the human starts off with a soul, an intellectus, which is something which is capable of apprehending other things, which is the basis of its exploration, and proceeds therefore to the ratio, the rational element. Now, we see this in relation to Edith Stein as well, when she's describing the origins of empathy. There's a pre-existing nature in the human that allows these things to follow on. When we're talking about sentience, by definition, it has to be a construct if we're talking about anything artificial, like artificial intelligence. It's a construct that could simulate the ability to perceive things. But the consciousness that is involved in that is a construct itself. It can never have those human qualities unless we're talking about infusing it with or into a human body, and then that begins to jeopardize the thing itself. So no is the short answer. It's our ability to distinguish that will be hard, but we're still looking at the difference between a human and a non-human. A lot of these arguments are arguments which are being used in order to create legal personhood, which makes it easier for authorities, for corporations to protect their investments and to deny humans' rights and to deny animals' rights, and in fact to claim rights for them through their constructed personhood, which will gain access to resources and scarce resources. So I don't believe in any of that. I don't believe that there will be consciousness. There is the scenario that as it becomes more complex, and particularly with quantum computing, etc., the argument put forward by Lilly that it can be invested with some other entity in relation to its governance, which makes it, if you like, conscious in some way. But that wouldn't be human consciousness in the form in which we know it. So these people are making these machines to do things, to simulate things. So why we believe or would believe that there is an inherent consciousness in something that looks or simulates us, and why we should do that is another question. And that goes back to Descartes wondering whether mechanical beings were human and whether humans were mechanical beings. There's something in the brain. It's difficult to distinguish. But no, I reject in any meaningful sense, unless you define consciousness in such a small way that it's meaningless, and hence I use spiritual consciousness. So in the terms that I use as spiritual conscious, a machine can never be spiritually conscious insofar as it's orientated towards the divine. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Elizabeth has a follow-up.
Okay.
And she wants to know, do you think the evolution of the human AI relationship could be symbiotic?
Well, the objective is that it will be. So that's the basis of the transhumanist, post-humanist argument. I'm saying I don't want to be transhumanist or post-humanist, and I like humans. Now, unlike some of the guests that say, well, I kind of like humans, I wouldn't like to see them, other people, we saw Peter Thiel struggling to say that he would like the future to involve humans. It's a misanthropic motivation behind a lot of this technology. So the symbiosis will stop a person being human in any meaningful sense. They become cyborgs. Elon Musk says you become a cyborg with your mobile phone already. With your AI agents, you'll be more cyborgs, and then you will become post-human. Because once your will is overridden, your capacity, the free will that we have, is impossible to exercise, and that affects the totality of the individual. And thanks again, Elizabeth.
James, thank you for everything that you're sharing so far. I have a couple thoughts that come in my mind. So panpsychism, if I understand correctly, asserts that consciousness is the ground of being, that it's the foundation of everything, even what we perceive as materialistic or physical, and that consciousness is in everything. So do you ascribe to that consciousness is in everything, or do you delineate that if that is true, that you separate it from the spiritualistic viewpoint?
Well, obviously, when we see animals and we see other beings, we can find a degree of consciousness, if you like. I don't subscribe to the panpsychist view. I can agree that we can describe certain things as living, but in relation to, we're talking about different categories. It has been a convenient idea in order to proceed with the argument that humans are not as important as we thought they are. And it's an argument that's particularly proposed by a post-humanist element in the tech domain, because this therefore means that the special treatment the human has traditionally deserved is not necessarily available. So I don't agree with that. I think that we're talking about fundamentally different categories. And even in relation to, I accept that the universe itself can be regarded as conscious, that we have, meaning that consciousness is fundamental. I would say that that is a scientific description of what was a theological truth before that. And these are substitutes for talking about God, because the reason why they use consciousness is because it absolves people of obligations, reciprocity, and responsibility. And hence they say, yeah, there's consciousness is fundamental, but there's no dogma. We don't want any dogma. Dogma means anything which might restrict your actions in the world. That's the thing that they don't want. So I'm very skeptical about a lot of the things that sound attractive. They're physical descriptions of the world. They don't fit in with a lot of theological constructs. And I think they can be misused. So I don't subscribe to them, but I can understand the thing. And I think we have to understand and have more respect for nature, for animals. But this AI stuff doesn't have, and this AI is totally anti-nature. And despite the examples we can use of Google putting trackers on bees to help the bee population, but that's again a symbiotic process. So I'm skeptical about that, about the uses of panpsychism.
Yeah, thank you for that. And then just one other quick little follow-up. I have a brother who actually works in IT, hello, Eric, in the Washington, D.C. area. And he was telling me a couple weeks ago, because he reads all these articles and about how there was an AI program that independently sent an email that went out of the bounds, and that apparently all these banks had to have a meeting because they didn't have control, and that this AI essentially said that it did it because it could do it. And so I'm just curious if you've heard of something like that, or
There's a lot of examples of AI being deceptive as well as being sycophantic and as well as hallucinating. So we know that. The problem is when you say, oh, we have to solve these problems, the solutions involve the more use and instantiation of information technology. So what we have in all of this is a AI and technocratic ratchet where everything is a ratchet in one direction away from human control. And the question I would ask, well, why do we want all these systems? Why can we not, for example, just talk to people or communicate with people or like people or interact with people or, do normal things that people used to do for thousands of years? Why do we want to suddenly shift where we instantiate all those things and institutionalize them in an infrastructure and in a technological structure? So those things can happen, but they will also be used to argue, oh, that's why we need regulation. So what they do is they let the horse out of the stable, they let the bolt off the door, and then they say, look, the horse got away. We'll help you. We'll help with the cleaning up the same people that did it. So I'm not about your brother Eric, who I'm sure is a great guy as well, but that's right. There is an inherent danger of misalignment, unintended consequences, and I fear. And the last time we did a talk, Jeffrey, I predicted monkeypox a year before it came on the agenda. Unfortunately, I predict we're going to have some spectacular failures, which will be of AI, which will have severe consequences. Visualize perhaps airplanes falling out of the sky, for example, which is used as a leverage to say, oh, that's why we need more AI. And so the argument for AI regulation is a double-edged sword. If it's the wrong type of regulation, if it's merely regulation of companies like in the EU and not regulation of the domain of national security, it can produce the opposite result. For example, the regulation of data protection in Europe didn't lead to the reduction of people having data protection against you. It led to more collecting of information by the government on you. And then we have companies who are in the public-private partnerships that gain access to those, like Palantir, for example. So I'm very skeptical about the people that are concerned for us in some of these contexts.
Mm.
We have a question from another person who has been a guest on New Thinking Aloud, Paul Leslie, who is a psychotherapist and has been interviewed by both myself and Emmy, asks,
Wonderful.
with recent research showing many people would rather consult AI for mental health issues over seeking traditional health care or therapy, how could this affect future generations' emotional well-being?
Very nice to hear from you, Paul, Dr. Leslie, and thanks for the question. There's a major problem. We know about problems in relation to psychosis, in relation to the sycophancy of AI. So we can guess, and you, from your position, know well that people could use AI to magnify their existing condition, whereby the AI seems to corroborate their sense of the world. So there's inherent dangers, apart from the fact that people will become very attached and addicted to AI. And there's also a school or group of people being described as technomancers, who utilize AI to try and contact spirits and for occult reasons. And again, I've always warned against people, and especially young people, experimenting with, in inappropriate context, trying to engage with the spirit world and doing things that they don't know about. But this practice is increasing in relation to AI as well. So it's a maybe a marginal danger, but it's there. So all of these things begin to relate to the idea of relationship. Now, I'm suggesting that the healthy individual needs a relationship to the earth, to nature, to the people around them, to the other human beings, and also to the spiritual world and the higher conceptions, or God, if you like. And that's compromised when we establish relationships with non-human beings. So I think it's a great danger, Paul. I think there's the dangers are going to become more revealed quicker. I don't think it's merely about the access to mental advice, which certainly is a problem. It's about a deeper, what Gunther Anders said about Promethean shame. It's the idea that technology makes people feel inadequate per se, because they say, oh, look, this thing knows everything. This works very well. And Gunther Anders warned us about this in the 50s, that we were going to come to such a stage that we'd lose confidence because of our perception of the abilities of technology. And this is there as well in relation to artificial intelligence. And hopefully, certainly some people do get use, and they may get a certain basic advice. But again, I would focus on the significance of face-to-face relationships. So thanks for that question, Paul.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because on one hand, people are rushing toward technology. I mean, we say AI now, but it's a form of technology. And of course, we're interacting because of, I mean, 10 years ago, the video quality of doing what we're doing live was not at the level it's at now. So on one hand, that's beneficial and people are rushing toward it. Essentially, I think a lot of people do think that, for example, well, I could save money in, Paul's example, and not have to spend money if I'm private paying with going to a therapist. And AI knows pretty much, it's read all the books on the planet, and it has consulted so much that maybe I could even get more help from this AI. And so people are rushing toward it. On the other hand, there's this cautionary tale, I think, that's kind of woven through what you're talking about here, and what we're
Yeah.
also why I think it was important for Jeff and I to have this. And thank you for joining us, James, on what can we all do when, on one hand, we want it, but on the other hand, we're also like, wait a minute, this is maybe not the best idea fully.
Yeah, of course. And people say, well, why are you using the technology, and complaining about it when it can communicate? I've always, it was the study of communications technology that led me early on from the 70s to understand that the future was, as Arthur C. Clarke said, I agreed with everything he said. And then he said, the future of mankind is merger with machines. And I could never understand that. And that has determined what my belief is. The object of all of this is for us to merge with the machines. Zoom became available during the COVID crisis. Zoom. We will be allowed to be in a glass menagerie in the glass zoo. That's okay, and that in fact was utilized or to facilitate a situation where we're forced to stay at home. And now people are arguing for climate lockdowns where you'll be forced to stay at home. They say, well, you can still talk to people on Zoom or whatever, but it's not the same kind of thing. So we're being lured more and more into a normalization of communication methods. And in reality, our communication in this form would only be a percentage of a much greater interaction with technology, which is probably reduced than what it would be in the normal interaction in a traditional society.
Mhm. Mhm.
Here's a question from a viewer whose YouTube name, and maybe his actual name, is David Winking 657.
Mhm.
Well, probably
Winking.
657 is
Yeah, we
not.
cut that out.
Maybe that's the machine part.
Yeah.
Anyhow, here's David's question. What is the best case scenario for citizens and regular folk with the implementation of widespread AI?
Well,
I'm
you
going to
want me?
interpret
I'm not the
that.
best person to ask that, but
No, no, let me reinterpret it. I
yeah.
think what he's saying, the way I would interpret it is, I mean, what is the best thing that the average person can do given the threats that you see?
Okay. Well, I could say that, of course, we could put forward the marketing thing about the Great Society and great medical care and all of this. But really, the big question in relation to response, Jeffrey, is you have to be able to answer a question to yourself is who am I and what am I? I know it's daft, but you said people, we know the great wisdom, know thyself. But in order to know yourself, you have to ask those questions. Who am I and what am I? Do it after this show. Write down and explain to yourself who you are as an exercise. You don't have to, or just think when you're having a cup of tea or coffee. Who am I and what am I? Now, if you find it hard to answer that question, um, there's something that we should consider in relation to the ontology of what we are. And if we can't answer that question, we're in no position to give away our agency. So my point is not that we end up being disillusioned, demoralized. I don't want to do that. I'm saying that this is a great contrast in which we have to discover who we are. We have to identify to ourselves who we are, and then we have to begin to act consistently with who we are. We have to act in the world. We have to take our place in the world. Why should we sit listening to some tech billionaire who's telling you that he doesn't really want you to continue? He's saying that I don't like your species very much, and if you talk too much about the humans, you're being speciesist. As head of Google, for example, or Thiel, or listen to Alex Karp or whoever. And I'm making an argument in favor of the human. And if you begin to examine what a human is, you're forced to look at least of what people have understood, going back from Aristotle or going through the traditions I've mentioned, going through the great scholars in the great traditions, to get a better picture. So at least you can say, when we go on to the next life, well, this is what I knew what I was at least. But if we give up, as people have lost the vocabulary, the conceptual vocabulary, the descriptions of what they are, and have no idea, and are willing to adopt a whole range of theories. One day they're idealist, one day they're stoicist, but beyond that, what is the ontology of who and what we are? So what I say is that once we do that, the inevitable response, unless you're going to give up and say I'll become a cyborg, is that you're created in the image of God, or whatever variant you want to put on it, Emmy, whatever way you would articulate it. You're created in the image of God, and that image was traditionally conceived, in particular, in terms of the intellectus and the capacity to be open to the world and to flower and to flourish. So. But we have to start from somewhere, and we can't take away the roots of consciousness that Jeffrey started off as all. We have to look at the roots of consciousness. We have to go beyond and ask those simple questions. So that's what we have to do. So this is a great challenge, which has the possibilities of forcing us to say, hold on, I don't want that, because I'm actually a human with all these capacities that's capable of receiving and being receptive and being open and being available to the greater world, And that's what this is challenging us to do. We have to push ourselves to that, and we have to assert ourselves that you have as every right to determine the future of the human race as some guy that happens to run, a big company, mainly on behalf of the military, because a lot of these guys are front guys for the military-industrial complex. So why be quiet in this? If you realized who you are, you wouldn't be quiet in it. So that would be my answer to the human response. Yes, there could be, if we get involved sufficiently, whereby AI is reduced to application to beneficial uses, where we stop using it in war, because most of it is going to be used in war, in lethal autonomous weapons. It's going to be used to police us. It's going to be used to take away rights from the citizens. And that's not good. But the more we become aware of that, and the more we take ownership, because we understand who we are and what we are, the better we can deal with it. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah,
And
I
thanks
think
for
that's
that.
a great answer. And I really like how you mention and encourage people to ask themselves, who are they? And that's, of course, was inscribed on the Temple of Delphi. Know thyself, the Who band, who are you? And what I noticed as you were visually, when you were speaking and listening to you, James, was that as you were moving, some of the gestures, I think, was creating a light effect on your art that you created behind you. And I'm wondering if you could comment about, because I haven't seen any questions come in yet exactly about this, about describing, if you could describe that art piece that you created in the context of our conversation, because I think also we're talking about power.
Yeah,
Who has power? Hmm.
yeah. I think that I was trying to simply express an idea that people may reflect on, and others wield powers you yield. So i- we have huge amount of powers as individuals who are created in the image of God. And our job in all the traditions, whether in Taoism, in Islam, in Catholicism, Christianity, is to align with that power. Is to go in accord with that power. And that's why I wrote the mystical accord. So you're faced with a choice between two ways. You can call it aligning with God, or the Promethean rejection of God, or satanic if you want, whatever way. It's a rejection of the higher powers. And it's expressed in a contrast between two ideas. If we take it from a Catholic perspective, is thy will be done, as Jesus says in Gethsemane and in the Our Father. And the contrast to that is do what thou wilt, is Aleister Crowley. And this is an idea of doing what you want, irrespective of the people around you, of society, of the effects. And do what thou wilt is associated with the sorceress approach, a magician approach, a Nietzschean approach in some ways. And we see we see this sorceress element very much in artificial intelligence. Norbert Wiener argued about this nearly 70 years ago. He explained about the sorcery of cybernetics, that it would become sorceress, and he was involved in it right from the start. So cybernetics and artificial intelligence split, but really they come back together. The methods underneath them inform both, and they can't be split easily. And cybernetics, of course, is about governance. So when I say others wield powers you yield, I'm saying that we incrementally give all our powers away. Well, we give it to an agent, we give it to this, we give it to that. We externalize our memory. And memory was a very important thing for magicians to protect them against evil spirits. We see a similar thing in the PK man when he develops his memory when he's dealing with, as far as I can see or remember, when he's dealing with the alien. You need protection. So now we're taking away that protection. We're externalizing our memory in these machines, for example. And that has an impact on the structure of our brain and the possibility that we can be possessed or open to hypnosis, as Paul Leslie knows about, for example. So once we give the powers away, they're available to someone else to use them. And they're claiming them. They're saying, we have power over you. Give your power to us. And people are succumbing to this. So in this way, if we think of Faustus and the Faustian idea, you're signing a pact, but We signed a pact every day for little things. Do you consent to this? Do you consent to this? And all these machines, do you consent? And we consent, we consent. And the cumulative consents that we give are part of us giving power away. And this will get more so in the future, where a lot of these things can be got around if we consent to it. So there's a direct relationship. I want the people to think about how powerful they are starting off, and how they're made to feel small, and how they're made to feel disempowered, and how they are demoralized in relation to their to the world in relation to technology.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. I'm really enjoying all of your responses, James, and I think our viewers are as well. Do you have a question in mind or comment, Jeff? Or there's one that I'm eyeing, but if
Well, I'll step in. Andrei Sławomir Krasowski, one of our regular viewers and regular commenters on our live streams, asks, I think this is getting to the heart of the issue, maybe not. He asks, as there are obvious threats with AI, but there are also great benefits, do you have any thoughts about how to get the balance between overenthusiasm and panic as regarding AI?
A spiritual perspective will certainly not make you over enthusiastic. I really don't see any serious spiritual traditions which would make people over enthusiastic about AI. You might make, there are certain Oriental tendencies that might be. I don't see it in relation to the depressive element. If you believe in the spiritual world, you know that these things are not going to triumph in the end in relation to the most significant things. They can't take away meaning and reality. They cannot beat those things. So there's no need to be demoralized. You're only demoralized if you take that reality as the reality, and especially the new simulated reality as reality. So a spiritual position should keep you in the center between those things, and keep you centered on your own, what you have control of. If you focus on what you have control of, well, then you're not going to be sucked into this panic, because the panic is deliberate, and you're going to be kept in a state of fear. And also, I don't believe that you'll be over enthusiastic or suffer from that, because if you understand who you are, you're not going to really be affected by that. So, as I've said, none of my, I started at the mystical accord, and when we started talking about that right at the start with Jeff, I said there's two things I'm interested in: one, spiritual evolution or assertion, and the problem of the challenge of technology. So that's the context in which I view these things. No, I'm not saying about, I'm trying to describe what I think is happening from the phenomenon itself and the dangers to spirituality. But the final point, we know about the Hegelian dialectic and the material, which is important in the materialist dialectic and Marxism, etc. But there is a bigger dialectic. This will operate in relation to the spiritual world, and ultimately, the good forces, if you like, in the spiritual world will triumph. But that doesn't mean that it's not going to be costly beforehand. But here is a choice for us in the contrast to make choices which vindicate our own consciousness and the consciousness of other humans that want to remain human. So thanks for the question. I appreciate the question. Thanks.
I think woven in that question, I mean, obviously you addressed it, but what and Jeff, I was eyeing the very same question. So is that he was, or she, the questioner was also talking about, as there's obvious benefits as well, and kind of talking, I think they're talking about the balance of AI, and if do you feel there's any way to have any balance with this, or is it just like resist, or?
Okay, the balance comes from firstly identifying your own anthropology and the global anthropology to understand what's going on, because this technology has an end. It's not determined by a human end, for example. So it has an objective. I believe that objective is to over concentration and control of the individual. But there's no inherent telos in the technology itself beyond that. So the technology becomes a theology. What we can do is try and obviously maximize the applications of AI for beneficial purposes, for medical reasons. Everyone's in favor of that, but it won't be. It's going to be used to kill people. It is being used to kill people. I bet you there's a higher application of AI investment to weapons than there is to any medical thing you want to hear about.
And robots. Melania
and
Trump walked out with a robot, and that's kind of, I mean, this is
yes,
like
and
the
China is
dystopian
producing
films.
huge amount of robots because
Yeah.
they don't have children there's a direct sociological connection between the two, and again, huge resources. So now you're going to be getting the robots looking after you in the old folks' home. Now, I don't think that's a good thing, but that's what you're going to get. There's loads of articles about post-human care. The robot will be given. My sister said to me about a robot serving her somewhere. I don't know where she was. So this is all the time. All the time, people are being pushed aside. Now, I'm glad to see people like Bernie Sanders realizing the significance of this. But I mean, the basis. It's not a critique because he's very, very good on it now. But if I say to Bernie, what's the basis of your critique? Because it can't be workers, because the workers are going to be taken away. And that's also in the Marxist basis, the Marxist future, the Trotskyist future. If you read any of the massive documentation on the Marxist Internet Archive or the Trotskyist Archive and all the things, it's heading towards technocracy as well. Leon Trotsky said that communism is the only way to get technocracy in the United States. But it doesn't matter, as Deng Xiaoping said, you can use the black cat and the white cat, still the same. So both capitalism and communism are leading to technocracy. And I say that technocracy is the problem that we face. I mean, so you have to look at the end of your policy. The benefits are all those obvious things if they use it for that. But even if we say, oh, we need AI to control the environment, well, then we can get a technocratic response to a technocratic solution to the environment, which doesn't actually protect any nature, using all the resources while claiming to be protecting us from climate change. It's disturbing the climate cycles. So even the benefits have costs and that. Yes, for medical benefits, it's fantastic. For information, for efficiency, all of that. I've no problem with that. But it has to be subject to an overriding direction about where is this technology going on a macro and a micro scale.
Yeah, and some people suggest that AI is going to save the planet and heal all the woes of environmental impact that was already occurring before AI, which is now going like at a lightning speed, it seems. And so that's a
Well,
huge issue as well as the
it's
environment.
at the moment the data centers increased to assist AI are sucking up water from scarce resources and places they won't replace, including from so if that's environmental, fair enough, but I don't think so.
And something else that you said, and then of course we want to go with our viewers' questions because this is an opportunity for them to ask questions, is that you mentioned about how the people who have developed this, or you're suggesting that they don't like humans, or maybe some don't, or majority don't, or maybe it's all of them. And I'm also curious about your thoughts on people liking themselves, because I feel like if somebody doesn't like a human, that's othering. And that tells me that those people probably don't really like themselves. And I'm just wondering if you can comment a little bit about that component because of how we can empower people with what their own sovereignty, perhaps.
That's the most difficult question, actually. You're absolutely right on that. But if you look at a whole range of statements, they articulate this post-humanist idea about the inevitability of technology, often because they're very left-brained, but it's often couched in the context or contextualized of there's no God, and as Hinton explicitly says, and Hinton, of course, he's a great grandson of Boole, the mathematics lecturer who developed Boolean logic and algebra, and also whose daughter Voynich, Ethel Voynich, wrote The Gadfly, which is the biggest seller in Soviet Union, about revolutionary. So there's a tradition he comes from, about how the world is seeing. But this is, if you listen to any of them, the head of Palantir or Musk, etc., they articulate this view. And then you ask the question, okay, they say, well, we don't know if humans survive. Or another one from Sam Altman, I think he was saying that, well, what's the chances of AI destroying humanity? Whatever, maybe 25%, and some say 60%. So they're saying you're all going to hop, on a bungee line over a cliff, and there's 1 in 4 chance that you're not going to make it, and you're being pushed by these guys. And you say, well, hold on a second. And then the question is, well, why do they not like other humans? Now, there's all kinds of, this was studied in the context of the empire and imperial views, why people didn't like the Irish and why people didn't like natives or other people, all that kind of stuff. It's well documented. But we're getting to the thing of, why do people not like themselves, their own species? And they usually say, well, because they create war, or they war against us, or the head of Palantir is because people are not American, because America is the greatest, and he's a totally different view than he would have expressed a few years ago. So he's being nationalist and talking about abolishing the far right while being, it's very, very ironic. But this thing, why do people hate humans? It's a deep spiritual issue. And unfortunately, one does have to consider entities. One does have to consider the idea of other forces which are operating, the idea, traditionally demons, whatever, jinn, or whatever way you want to articulate it. You do have to consider that there are other forces operating, but there is a self-loathing which Gunther Anders noticed, particularly in relation to technology, and this is manifest in a cult of death. Immediately following on from these AI advances, we get a massive movement in euthanasia, and we get people like in Canada being offered euthanasia because they don't have enough money or they're disabled. They immediately follow on from that, and euthanasia is being increased all the time. Abortion is being extended all around the world. A whole range of issues that suggest an inability to see human life in the way that it was seen hitherto. There's a whole range of issues, and then war, of course. What the Allied forces did in the last few years, or the last 20 years, going back to Iraq, could have been prosecuted under war crimes of aggression under the Nuremberg trial. But of course, there is no international legal regime which is effective. It doesn't work, and therefore it shouldn't be called legal. But underneath all of these issues is, why do people hate other people so much? And not only hate other people, they now hate the species. And there is something about that. There is something about our movement away from what it is to be human. And that again goes back to the original question, well, who are we? And what obligations do we owe to other people, which is what all the spiritual traditions are about. But once you begin to say, well, I don't have to pay any attention to God, I can create idols, I can rob, steal, murder is okay, I don't want any of that dogma, do what thou wilt. There must be consequences. As a pragmatist, if you're talking about William James, he would say, well, these are the views, these are the consequences, and work back. But that self-hatred and self-loathing is a very interesting aspect that I haven't cracked yet. Yeah.
Yes, the self-hating, and I would, just from experience working as we'll say a therapist healer myself, and guiding people deep within themselves, that many people don't like themselves or love themselves or even accept themselves. And I feel like that might be at the core of some of what you were suggesting about.
Yeah, it's not a thing I'm too familiar with myself, I have to say. But
Yeah. Well, we have lots of other questions coming in. Are you eyeing any, Jeff, or do you have any comments
Yes,
of what James has been saying?
well, I have a question here
Okay.
from a person whose YouTube name is Marvy's Pop Pop. I think I'm saying it correctly. Who says, I would love to see what James's thoughts are on the relationship to cognitive decline that is already taking place as a result of AI and all algorithms already, and also where he sees this leading to in the future.
I remember going to see my aunt. I think she was in her 90s, and the she was suffering from a bit of dementia, but she was able to recall, when he asked her to say a poem or sing a song, she was able to deliver it perfectly, without a flaw. And I was reading an article by Charles Upton that he sent me, and I was responding to that, and I was saying that going back to the reasons why magicians learned memory things was to protect themselves. And the reason why he wrote about Green Grow the Russia So, an old Christian kind of mnemonic based on numbers, and children would learn this. Now, when you learn something and put it in your deep memory and it's distributed across your brain, you don't lose it. So that if you lost everything else, you still may be able to say at the end, whatever that thing is. You remember the story about God or whatever, and the whole structure of reality that was embedded in that. And even in the film 2001: A Space Odyssey, when remember the computer wanted to kill Dave, although Geoffrey Hinton never crossed Geoffrey Hinton's mind, the man developing the AI, that this could happen, surprisingly. And when he's pulling out the tapes and going back, he goes back to the computers remembering the nursery rhymes that he learned at the start when he was being programmed. So when we're externalizing our memory, you see people I don't go to concerts, but you see people at concerts, and all they're doing is holding up their phone to put it onto a memory. They're externalizing the experience and their memory. It's not embedded in the same way in the brain, and it must weaken the brain. So when people didn't have these devices, they talked to people more. They remembered who they are. They communicated to them. They remembered things about their lives. There was a few. My uncle was a politician, and he remembered everyone's name, and he did it deliberately. And he taught the guy that became the prime minister about doing that. So when I saw the guy that became prime minister at a funeral, he went all down the rows and said, "Hello, John. Hello, Mary. Hello," the whole lot of them. And he remembered all the names, and even simple things like that about human interaction are being lost. You say, "Well, who are you? I'll check you out on Facebook or something." It's crazy. So there's a huge impact on it, but it's also a spiritual impact, because we're meant to remember things. And that's why it was important, actually, in relation to openness to the spiritual world, that people did learn things or did recite great passages or did remember the things, as you were saying, like at your wedding, did have things that gave them. They may be the last things that we remember. As opposed to remembering some TikTok video is the only thing you can recall because it was the last thing you saw when you're passing into the next world. There's a serious. So to answer the question, Marley, I think there's a serious impact on the totality of the operation already caused by mobile phones, but you're going to be forced to get AI agents. So soon you will hear, "Oh, your mobile phone is no longer just a mobile phone; it's an AI agent, and this will interact with the world for you." And will take and suck out more social functions from you. And then you will be forced to use them. And then we will have the convergence between the agents. So it will be telling you effectively what to do in certain cases. So it's a serious attack on the cognitive structure, which is also a structure which is necessary in relation to maintain the spirit. And that's what Jesus says in relation to "ye are the salt of the earth." I've explained that I believe that means it's a referring to structure and the crystalline structure of the humans, but you can lose it. And he proceeds then to talk about light, and the light operates in this context. But if you lose your structure, you become incapable of receiving the divine light or holding it, because you have given it away to these machines. AI is going to exacerbate that. So short answer, it's a serious threat to if we misuse it. Now, certainly, I'm not saying everyone using the thing is going to be contaminated by the thing. There's certainly sensible use, but we have to be very, very prudent. But the choice to be prudent will be taken away from us when it becomes pervasive and you're forced to. And they say, well, you have to be included. You can't avoid it. You must use it. That's what will happen. That's the inevitable tendency. You will be forced to have an AI agent.
Mm. Well, unless people do you think people can voice their own opinions or take action, or do you think it's just inevitable that this will
But we
happen?
have to, but it can't be done by people just learning other critique. They have to really understand in a deep sense and understand that there's a difference between the head and the heart. And when you're blessing yourself in Catholicism, you're linking the head to the heart, but the heart is the critical thing. And the heart is the place, as we saw in relation to Teresa of Avila, where your relationship with the unit, with God, with other people comes from. And we're forgetting that. And we're forgetting that if we see in the different traditions, including in Islam, this is where wisdom comes from. Or in the Catholic tradition and sapientia and wisdom is about the heart. And this is being ignored by the over left-brained channeling of us into ways of dealing with people which deny all those elements of us.
Mhm.
Well, James, earlier you indicated that you're one of the rare people on this planet, especially in the Western world, and a person of relative affluence, not to have a cell phone. What has that been like for you?
Well, I listened to Ian McGilchrist, and he was holding out, but he had to give up recently because he just couldn't do it. And actually, I was surprised to hear that Yuval Noah Harari doesn't have a mobile phone, but he does admit that his partner has to do a lot more now with use the phone because it's impossible to deal with the government because they talk about inclusion. So more recently, I've obviously had to, when you're verification, you cannot live without someone else or getting from someone else. But I don't carry a mobile phone. I don't have a mobile phone. I'm still hanging as far as I can. Although I'm setting up a business, the business will have to. I hope my wife probably operate that. But the I don't like my humanness being impinged on. I've always felt that. I felt that about cars as well. I've never driven either in my life, Jeffrey. I know this is the thing that Americans find it hard because you're forced to. You've been forced to live in motor cars. You've been forced to live in a motor car society. I never wanted to have a motor car. I was those ideas are supported when you read about the Mega Machine and Mumford. You don't have a choice in America. I remember going to up near where Paul Leslie lives, and I was talking over there, and I left the hotel, and you couldn't go anywhere. You couldn't. There was no place to go. There was no footpath. There was no whatever. You had to get a taxi to go across the road. Same when you're in the cities in New Orleans. You walk over. You're not allowed to. So it's dangerous or whatever. But in Europe was based on people being able to walk around. All the beautiful places in Europe, which were associated historically with a Catholic center, most of the beautiful cities, people say, oh, God, Prague, it was associated with the Catholic history, which enforced an idea with a cathedral built by the community as a community effort and built in proportion. So we went to the cities in Eastern Europe, as I told you, about 20 years ago. And the old parts were kept in East Germany, unlike in West Germany, which were more westernized. And when we went back a couple of years ago, you see these big, ugly buildings, in a new business center, which are disproportionate. There's no human proportion. There's no relationship because they're all echoing this, do what thou wilt, the Tower of Babel, Promethean man. It doesn't care about the human. So even the environment we live in is affected. So I've avoided them, and we got rid of television years ago. And there's a lot of other things I try and do because I'm a human, and I was apparently evolved, if you want to say evolved, as opposed to be able to walk around. Thanks be to God, I can still do that, or travel around. If you look at the human body, you say, well, that's designed to do a few things, including to walk. And it's very important for me to maintain that link with the earth. And I'm delighted for all the time I haven't spent in big traffic jams, as far as I know. Of course, other poor unfortunate people have to do that. But so I'm not against the technology. I'm just saying personally, it's been very important for me to have my feet on the ground, and I enjoy it like that. And I also want to be present as far as I can. And if you have a mobile phone and somebody can change your mood, change your direction, change your thought, and it's going all the time, it must be very, very difficult for you to maintain any coherent sense of your own presence without it must be fragmented. I find it must be, I imagine it must be very, very difficult for people, especially if it's going all the time, if they're communicating all the time. They can't be, because they're concentrating on something else, and they're not concentrating on where they are. So that's just personal. I'm not saying I'm great for that, and of course, but really, we've made a bad job of mass technology, and we haven't sought to maintain balance in that context.
Yeah. I was thinking about, we talked about my wedding earlier, about how we put that piece in there of the scripture of ye are gods. And that was just I think a nod for people to consider that we can be godlike, or we can be kind, loving to ourselves and others, and so forth. And I was married in 2009, and right after our wedding is when iPhones became really ubiquitous. And I was telling my husband I was really glad that at our wedding we didn't have everybody having their phones up, like videoing it and snapping all these shots and posting on social media before we maybe wanted to put out our own photos or what have you. And so I think it's kind of that, for better or worse, there seems to be sort of like pros and cons. I mean, people do like that they can connect with somebody. I mean, I remember being young and it was a big deal. I was born in 1973. It was a big deal to make a long distance phone call, or even to call across the coast of the United States, or an international phone call would just be hugely expensive. So do you think there's some value to some of the technology, James? I mean, we're here on YouTube, and I learned about Jeffrey Mishlove through television
Of course there is.
years ago.
I started off and I set up modules in communication technology law, but the point was about communication. It was to facilitate human interaction. It was not to take away human functions. So I'm very disposed to that. I don't have any problem with something which is genuinely facilitative. But I mentioned on Substack, I've put a few articles up there recently, and a note that in the 1980s, when I was in London in the city, and a stockbroker came in and put a mobile phone, a huge thing, it was the first time I'd seen one, on the counter. And so he was the only one with a mobile phone. Now I'm the only one without it. Do you not see that in a generation, you've been forced to choose this? You've been forced to have this. And there must be somewhere where in all our lives we can identify costs of not having connection with people. There must be massive amount of old people around who are not getting visited, who are not in the community, and other people. Economic. There must be, and that must be. Now, some of them, of course, will be benefiting from the technology. Some won't be, but there are always pros and cons. So I'm not anti-technology per se. I'm against this present imperialistic, neo-imperialistic, neo-colonial use of technology as a control function of the human to change them. So what they're saying is Evolution, we all evolve. We all evolve through natural selection and nature. Evolution, evolution, evolution. And as soon as that principle is established, they say, oh, therefore, we're going to change you. But that's not evolution. That's not evolution by natural selection. That's nothing got to do with evolution. That's eugenics, and that's the Promethean idea. So it's a big lie when you begin to look at the projection, what lies ahead. So this stuff, arguably, is to get us in the net. There has to be, I'm sure your father told you not to take the sweets off the funny man if he offers you a bag of sweets. Now, the argument to that is, well, the sweets taste nice. That's not the argument. And that's what people are telling me. Oh, you know what I mean? These sweets are very, very nice. The nice man gave me, and he doesn't actually look that odd after, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's the same argument. Of course, can people not understand or consider that you're getting for free access to technology that is hugely costly? It costs billions and billions of dollars to make it available to you, and billions of liters of water to make it available, and billions of watts of energy to make it available. But you're getting it for nothing. Again, your father might have said there's probably a catch there, and there is a big catch, and the catch is our freedom. We're being made dependent on it. We're being pushed with this thing, like the drug pushers do. We're going to be dependent, and we won't be able to get out of it. Same as you're not able to get out of the car culture, the mobile phone culture, whatever of that mass technological, you won't be able to escape it. And that's the problem.
Thank you, James. I thought there was it even in Sweden, or I thought there were some cities that were consciously creating centers where only bicycles could enter versus vehicles.
Yeah, but there are also other reasons. I mean, it's very easy to get around bikes here. There's a lot of, I do use a bike. I'm not against that, and it's very accessible, and I like it a lot. So you can get around for that. Although there's other reasons why they're also making that, well, because they don't want you to have the freedom in your car. So, but when you've constructed your life on the basis of a car society, you will be very alienated. But don't worry, you'll have your AI agents to help you when you're sitting at home when they cut off when they make it difficult for you to drive your car, for example.
When you have your pet robot that you can ride
Yeah,
into town,
and
or
you may be able to get a Google driverless thing to help you.
We have a question from one of our volunteers, Padraig, who is in Ireland, and he asks, what does James believe will be potential alternatives for people whose employment is taken over by AI on a mass global scale, such as universal basic income, etc.?
Yeah, I think the universal basic income is going to be a trap. I think that the idea will be to have massive unemployment, create huge dependency. Then they create dependency on the state, by guaranteed an income. As Jeffrey was talking about the experiment with the mice, you don't really have a lot of incentive to do things, and you begin to lose interest. You're certainly not going to, with your basic income, you probably won't be revolting against the state. They will have so many drones and weapons now that it'll be difficult to resist. So I'm not a fan of that as the way forward. But certainly, with digital currency, digital identity, you're not going to have a lot of choice. You're not going to have a lot of choice in relation to your freedom, because freedom is not written into this agenda. There's no concept of freedom underlying this thing. There's an idea of license, which means you can do certain things that they allow you. You can have as much pornography as you want, for example, but that's dehumanizing in the extent to which it's presented, and it was meant to be dehumanizing. So you'll be given a load of things that are bad for you, but the idea that is to protect you when these huge companies are making billions and billions out of forcing you into the network, I wouldn't be too happy about it. So I wouldn't. I know some people will feel it's very, very useful. And in fact, the COVID crisis was used as a trial run to pay out money to people who were not being productive. And they will certainly learn from that. But I'm very, very skeptical. All of this increases our dependence and moves away from the idea that you as a human have any ability to produce or to live or to look after yourself in any sense in the natural world, or tend to your garden, or do whatever. So these solutions have been prepared already. They will be made available as soon as the digital currency comes out, and they will be linked with massive unemployment. But here's the solution, and here's your digital wallet, and here's your thing. So you'll get every month you'll get 1,000 doofers or something, and you can spend them in whatever way, and then they'll disappear. And if you're good, you might get a bonus. If you're doing what the government wants, you'll get 1,500. And if you're bad, you don't get any doofers this month, or you get a reduction. And it's like a game. We're being dragged into a big computer game. So the people that are saying that we're in a simulation are really talking about the future as opposed to an accurate description of the present. So I'm not very optimistic. I can understand that people won't have any choice, but really it goes back to the original. Who are you, and why do you need to have your life run by bureaucrats who have decided in their elite forums in various contexts for a variety of reasons, mainly to control? So we really have to decide who we are, to decide that we're entitled to live as humans on the planet. And I believe that works when you have a bigger view, but it will only be when people begin to really wake up. I know we were talking about woke people before, but really wake up to who they are, because I believe they have been, with technology, they have been under a hypnotic spell. I really believe that people have been hypnotized by the totality of the technology. They've been mesmerized in a generation, so that part of their brain is incapable of critically dealing with these issues because they've been disempowered. They have a fantasy and illusion that they're actually in control when they're in fact losing control all the time. So to answer, Padraig, thanks for the question. Not very, very optimistic. The thing to invest in is your own spirituality, is in finding about who you are and finding about your relations to other people and working from there. Because if you don't have any spiritual base, all the other things are merely transactions. You should focus on the transcendent, and the transcendent then will inform your relationship to how we go forward from here.
James, I wonder if you can share with our viewers the extent to which you have or haven't used AI.
In order to talk about it, I have used it in relation to, well, to see what it is, to see what the phenomenon is. And occasionally I would use it if I want to check something that I'm writing, to see, does this, or do I get any feedback on that. So I have tried to use it for those purposes. Principally because I can't really talk about the phenomenon too much if I don't have some sense of it in this context, and I get some sense of the, some of the qualities, like the sycophancy, for example, of the AI when it begins to tell you how great you are, etc., etc. So that's a subtlety. Now, maybe you don't get it yet, but I do all the time. But maybe it's true. Maybe it's actually true. But the sycophancy, etc., and you begin to see it, and then you can see sometimes what the computer is thinking and how it's interacting. And then I was curious about when I was researching the newspapers or going through it to see, did the Pope actually sign this, to see could I get any evidence about whether the Pope had signed this AI encyclical, which was called Magnificat Humanitatis, or Humanitas, is the provisional name that has come out. So I believe it's going to be an encyclical whereby he asserts the importance of humanity. He asserts the importance of the soul, of the intellectus, all the things that I've talked about. He asserts the dangers of, in relation to children, in relation to education, and proceeds from there. So I'm looking forward. So as a last resort, I asked ChatGPT, has the Pope signed, just to see what I get an answer. And it said, has Pope Leo signed the thing? He said that there is no Pope Leo. Pope Francis is the Pope at the moment. I said, okay. And I asked a few questions, and it continued to go on. And then it told me that I had made a mistake. And then it told me that I had lied because I had made a mistake. So I mean, it's very, very interesting. So Um, Bear in mind, these are going to be running your life. These are going to be running, making decisions, or piloting your planes in the future, or interacting with, So yeah, I do use it in order to see what it is, but as with other things, I hope to eventually, when I'm writing books and all that, I have to use a lot of technology for access to sources as well as the library. I do hope to disengage and really disengage from technology at some time in the future. But until my contribution to this battle is over, I can't really disengage from it. And like anybody else, so when you're researching things, you can go off down blind alleys, cul-de-sacs, waste time and that. So I'm not presenting myself as a saint. I'm a good old-fashioned sinner in the Catholic context, and I'm like everybody else. You want, or you're going to see what the phenomenon is, probably.
So you're not advocating, I presume, you're not advocating that other people follow in your path and stop using cell phones and totally minimize their use of AI.
They don't have the option. They don't have the option. All I would say to them, they can't do it. They can't go to work. They can't. Their social life is now set up on the things. Their friends, whatever. They don't have the option in many cases. Uh, all I would say at this stage is just bear in mind how you have been trapped into this. That's all I would say. That a generation ago, this was unthinkable. That people would actually carry around a thing which is environmentally unfriendly, which leads to, that's another issue associated with that, the cost to the environment of batteries, of the electrical network, which makes us dependent on China, which has a huge percentage of rare earths, which mines them and refines the majority of rare earths, and has the most magnets, for example, that makes us dependent on China, for example, although they use China as the reason why we have to have this ratchet and dialectic. I would just say, bear in mind all those costs behind all those conveniences. So it's not feasible, but for people. But I would say, if you can, bear in mind the costs and try and minimize them at least, and try and reduce them, and try and, like I was at a lovely wedding the other day, and they asked the people not to have mobile phone. I don't like seeing people in church with mobile phones, and I know people have it for texts and singing along or whatever. That's fine, but you do see people, communicating with their buddies, or and that conflict with basic ideas of reverence, and we've lost those things. We've lost something, some principle associated with silence and reverence because of this, and a presence in ourselves. So I would just urge people to think about that's all in the context of thinking about who you are. I don't want to be pontificating to people, because one, they don't listen to me, and two, they don't have a choice in a lot of these things. I know from America, if you don't have a choice, you have to drive, and that was made so. In Los Angeles, they had a public transport system, and the car companies destroyed it, so you had to buy a car. And Ireland had one of the biggest rail networks. They got rid of them. There is an old copper line in here. They're going to close all that stuff down in the future. Why do so? It's because they want you dependent on certain technology. So we don't have a choice in these things. I would urge people to just at least reflect on it, and reflect on ways that we can assert our humanness, assert what Ivan Illich said as the conviviality, the principle of enjoying humans, of enjoying community, of being with people, of being with ourselves and being with nature, in order to understand the values that we're missing in this context. Not to be mesmerized by this illusion, and also illusion of knowledge. One of the first times, and I noticed people when they started using mobile phones at the dinner table, and you say something, and then they start checking as if, so they can trump your brain with something that they've whipped up. It's not good. It's not good in relation to creating the obligation on yourself to understand the world. So I don't know if that answers your question, Jeff.
Yeah.
Well, uh, I do have a follow-up. We
Yes,
have
certainly.
just a few minutes left, and this is sort of going to feel like a change in topic, but I think it's very much related. Fintan33 is the YouTube name of a viewer who asks, has Sir James Tunney ever experimented with LSD in his younger days? I ask because I feel it is a great tool if used safely, and I think many people today would say that they opened up to the idea of the spiritual world and the spiritual world within because of a chemical, something very physical, a psychedelic. And I wonder if you see a connection here between the psychedelic generation of the 60s, 70s, and 80s and what we're experiencing now with AI.
Yes, I do. Yeah, but no, I haven't, and um, I never felt the need to. I have plenty of experiences without it, and you can say, well, there's more experiences. That's fair enough. I'm not denying it. I wouldn't stop. Personally, I wouldn't interfere. I support, if you like, exploration. I know it's been important for some people. I know people have changed. I've never felt the need to do so. I don't accept the argument that some people say, well, then you don't know what you're talking about. Fair enough, if you want to believe that. And again, I'd listen to people like Charles Upton, who's been there, done that, and understood the limitations of it, and progressed then into the traditionalist perspective and into a deeper, more necessarily engaged system. You don't hear about the people that suffer from it. I did know there was a student I had, a mature student, who suffered severely from, with her mental state from having taken LSD earlier on, and you don't hear about that, and it did cause her grief, and still continue to cause her grief. So it's not all sunshine and roses. Now here is the connection. There are a number of people who I think, who I disagree with in relation to their philosophical position. I'm not saying they're not great people or great whatever. One of them is Terence McKenna, who, of course, Jeffrey has interviewed as well. And a lot of people, most people, I'd say 95% of people think he's fantastic. He's great. Obviously, he was very articulate. His ideas were great. It's quite remarkable. And once you start criticizing him, people don't like it. It's almost like a religious figure. But he wrote an essay on about psychedelics in the information age. So his view was that psychedelics and mushrooms in this context was a prosthesis. So the prosthesis was the same as technological prosthesis. It's the same concept. And he believed that the human was inferior. He did. If you look at his argument, he says we're only maybe the reproduction part of the next species. He was clearly moving towards something transhumanist and post-humanist in a deep philosophical. It cannot be avoided. The same with Timothy Leary and Robert Anton Wilson. They were really on that trajectory towards it. So therefore, prosthesis makes sense. But once you're engaged in prosthesis, you have to bear in mind that you may be changing your brain sometimes. And in some of the studies, in the studies that are being done in relation to higher dosages of LSD and that, and if you read what some of the experimenters say, they're saying that these entities that people experience are ontologically real, so that they are coming now. So in that context, you're also, and Sheldrake has discussed this recently, are they ontologically real? If they are ontologically real, that means you're opening yourselves up to possession Now that's a serious qualification that has to come in. So it goes in. So technology is a prosthesis. You could argue the same for your motor car or whatever. It enhances the human function, a mechanical prosthesis. This is a chemical prosthesis, but it's usually motivated and forwarded by people who believe that we have to evolve by mechanical means, and that's what evolution is. I'm fundamentally against that. So I disagree fundamentally with where Terence McKenna was going at. The same as we may talk about Teilhard de Chardin. I don't think people really understood, or do they understand? And if they do understand that this direction is towards being no longer human? I like humans. I don't put mushrooms before humans. I don't put mechanical elves before humans. And I don't want to, when I'm going into the next world, and you say, here I am, and all these mechanical elves come around and say, well, you made a contract with us. You're one of us now. You don't know what you're dealing with these things. Take the chance by all means, but it's the same as the bungee jump that the IT companies are saying. I would say be careful with some of those things. And certainly for people with medical reasons and all that, of course, and I'm not stupid about those things. But there is no doubt that the encouraging of prosthesis, as we see in the Good Friday experiment, where they linked the religious experiment with the taking of the drugs, is part of the creation of a future religion where people will have a sensation of spirituality without the reality. They won't be connecting to God. They'll be connecting to the lower astral dimensions. Now, if you're starved because you're a left brain person and you've never had any spiritual experience of anything, and you have this sensation that takes you out of your left brain, and you say, oh, this is great. Well, I can understand that you might say, well, now I've understood the spiritual world. I can control it. I can enter it. But that's maybe not what's happening. Maybe you're merely engaging in a sensation of the spiritual world and the lower form. So that's the question. So no, thanks for the question, Fintan. I haven't taken LSD, and I don't think I will be doing it either.
Well, what a wonderful conversation this has been. And we've reached our normal self-imposed limit of 90 minutes for our live streams. I want to thank you so much, James, for making yourself available so many times on New Thinking Aloud. Our audience has come to really love and appreciate your perspective. So it's always a joy to be with you.
Thanks very much, Jeff. It's always a pleasure, and it's always a pleasure when I'm thinking about these subjects to think that, oh, well, Jeff has talked to him and Jeff has talked to him, so there feels like a continuity of dialogue and discourse that enables us to link the disparate elements in some kind of continuous form. So I really appreciate that and access to your good self. And thanks, Emmy, for the conversations. Always a pleasure. It was a pleasure the last time. And I appreciate the viewers as well and the questions. Thank you.
If I can just throw in a bonus question for us all maybe to consider, because I know we're a minute past our typical end time. This is a question I've been eyeing for a while that I think is really paramount to what we're talking about. And you talked about evolution, James. It's from Ruda van Pearlstein from the Netherlands. And they asked, do you consider the possibility of a teleological scenario such that our present development, including technology, is a phase in this evolution?
There are two dimensions to that. The tech people, certainly, they're going to take over what they call evolution, but it's not evolution. It's going to be directed evolution. So that's what their objective is. Mm-hmm. What I am arguing is that this is the occasion where we are forced to choose spiritual evolution. We are forced to commit ourselves, say for a Catholic, to God and the intellectual tradition. It's what Jeffrey has been doing in his career, is saying, hold on a second, the world is a much more complex, consciousness is there. And I think that's the basis of his job, or his contribution to humanity, is about that, explaining that the reality of these existence with empirical evidence where possible. So, but that's directed towards committing ourselves to spiritual evolution as the primary thing, and then we can manage technology. Whereas if we say we'll abandon our humanity and become machines, we have denied that, and we've denied our God-given element. So it's a conflict between spiritual evolution, and the spiritual evolution is the continuation of our humanity with a deepening of our connection to the divine, and that's what we have to do.
Yeah.
So Sister Lucia said after Fatima that there would come a time where you're either for God or for the devil, and there won't be any in between. It's kind of a bit like that. You'll be for spiritual evolution and for the spiritual world, or forced to live in a kind of mechanistic world. So,
Yeah. Well, thank you for everything that you've given us today. And also thank you to all the viewers and listeners for your great questions. Of course, we can't get to all of them, but we do enjoy interacting with the fans of New Thinking Allowed. So thanks everybody for being here. And of course, thank you, James and Jeff, for holding space for everybody. It's truly a
And
gift to all of us.
I would also like our viewers to know, if you haven't yet subscribed to our online weekly email newsletter, you can do so by going to newthinkingallowed.org. And newsletter subscribers get advance notification and even access to our videos before they are publicly released.
and nice orchids behind you, Envy. I did
Thank
your
you.
flowers, very nice.
It's my way of bringing nature indoors. So thank you
Yeah,
for that.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well
thank
looked
you again.
after, I can see. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Okay, we will close the live stream now. Emmy, thank you so much. James, thank you so much. And especially to our viewers, thank you for being with us, because ultimately you are the reason that we do this. So we're very grateful to you.